Hello, beautiful, and welcome back to a new episode of Vagina Truth Bomb, the podcast. I am really appreciative of you checking in today and listening to this episode, and I really look forward to spending this time with you. So, I just want to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer. I am sat in a cupboard because I do not have the best recording equipment. I'm literally just using my phone, and I apologise if the sound isn't fantastic, but one of the things, like I talked about in the first episode about perfection stopping me, I just didn't know where to start when it came to podcast recording equipment. So I just thought, let's just keep it simple, Amy, and use our phones, and then as things progress we can look at the next hurdle of getting some better equipment. So it is carnival weekend where I am today, and our town has a carnival every summer. It's a really big event, really well attended, and it is carnival today, and there's lots going on in the town. There's lots of like fairground rides and loudspeakers going on, and where I normally sit to record and work, you can hear a lot. Plus my neighbours' children are playing in their gardens, which is really lovely to see, but they are quite noisy, and I don't have a problem with that. I love seeing children playing outside, but someone once said to me, if you record in a closet, in a cupboard space, then it gives better sound quality. So I'm coming to you live from my tap room floor. So we have a room in our house that isn't a proper room because it's kind of in the eaves, so you can't stand up properly in it all the way in because the eaves go down, and we call it our tap room because we just put all of our storage in here. So I'm sat next to dog beds, suitcases, who gives a crap toilet roll, got a big box of that here, and Christmas decorations. So this is where I am, the glamour of my life. So I've got a cup of tea and a bottle of water, and I'm excited to dive into this episode. But I just wanted to give you some context there because I just didn't want you thinking I had this really glamorous lifestyle when clearly I don't. Okay, so in this episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you kind of a whistle-stop tour of my health journey, because I know in the first episode I talked a lot about what changes I wanted to see in the world or needed to see in the world and why. And I felt it was really important for me to share with you some of my experiences so you understand where I'm coming from. And I want to stress before I start, this is going to be as condensed as I can do it, because I know there's going to be space and opportunity in future episodes for me to talk in a lot more detail about everything that I'm going to share in this episode. I just felt, given that I am a women's health specialist, this podcast is about women's health, that to give you some of my experience and history at the beginning would be really helpful for you. So I have some notes here, and I know I'll have missed stuff out, but I am going to try and share as much as I can with you, and hopefully give you a little bit more understanding about myself and my background. Okay, so going back to the very beginning, I was a really early developer. I started my period when I was 9, and my body just developed really quickly. And when I started secondary school, I had a woman's body basically, and was a lot more mature, physically mature than my peers. And from the beginning, my periods were really painful and exhausting. And literally from the start, that was my experiences of my bleed, was that it was really painful. I felt sick, I got headaches, I had heavy periods, and just felt absolutely rubbish for a good week out of each month. And then as I started to get a little bit older, and when I say a little bit older, we're talking like beginning of secondary school, I started to get a lot of urinary tract infections, a lot of cystitis, and then I would be given antibiotics because whenever I got an infection in my urinary tract, it came on like really quickly, and really like it was all or nothing, which is much the case with all of my health issues. But yeah, started with urinary tract infections, kept getting antibiotics to treat those, and then when the antibiotics course ended, I would get thrush. So literally just on a cycle of periods, cystitis, thrush for a good number of years. And then when I got to late teens, I started to struggle with my digestion, with my stomach, and mainly with elimination. So I had really bad constipation. And looking back, it was triggered or heightened around the time that I started my GCSEs. And then it just became an ongoing problem for a long, long time for me. And I had lots of medical interventions around being able to go to the toilet. And I would go, this is not even an exaggeration, I could go up to a month, 6 weeks without a full evacuation of my bowels. It was a really, really big issue for me. When I got to about 23, 24, 25, my symptoms really, really heightened, and I was just really struggling with everything. I was struggling with constipation, I was struggling with my periods, and like I said, like this cystitis and thrush cycle, and everything just kind of hit a peak. And then when I got to about, I think I was, I can't remember, but I moved doctors. I kept going to the doctors, and it was like banging my head against a brick wall. I couldn't get an appointment with a doctor. They had like this triage service where I had to go and see a nurse before I could get to a doctor, and I just kept going to the doctor and just getting nowhere, like absolutely nowhere. Didn't see the same person twice. It was just a mess, a real big mess. And during this time as well, I'd moved to university and was living in a different city. So obviously different city, different healthcare, different doctor, etc. So really struggled with everything. Came back from university, still struggling, got to like 24, 25, and I was at the point where it was literally crisis. Really significant impact on my physical health, my quality of life, and my mental health really, really started to struggle as well. And it wasn't until I moved doctors, I moved to the town that I live in now, and registered with the doctors, got to see a new doctor who actually listened to me. It took me a few goes to get to the right one, but I found this amazing doctor. She was fantastic, and she referred me for a scan. And I went and had an ultrasound scan, which I will tell you the whole story around that in another episode, because that's a story in itself, as is most of these points. But long story short, had an ultrasound scan, and they found a cyst on my left ovary that was later, when I went for further scans and investigations, it was 32 centimetres in size. So it was huge and obviously taking up a lot of space in my abdomen. And around this time, I was seeing lots of different people at the same hospital. So I was seeing a consultant around my cyst, which I was waiting to have surgically removed. They had to make sure it wasn't cancerous. And then at the same time, I was having issues with really bad headaches and losing my peripheral vision on occasion. And I had an MRI scan, and they found that I had a benign tumour on my pituitary gland. And then I also had a smear. This was all within like the same couple to 4 months. I had a smear done, and they found precancerous cells. So I had to have a loop biopsy removal on my cervix. So I was kind of living in the hospital, lots and lots going on. And I kept thinking to myself, this must all be linked. Surely, if I'm getting cysts on my ovaries, growths in my brain and abnormal cells on my cervix, then something must be going on. But I never got anything answered. Every time I went to a appointment, I left with more questions than I had answers. And what you've got to appreciate here, and I know that if you're listening to this podcast because you're experiencing similar things, you will definitely appreciate this. When you are struggling with your health, you struggle to show up and advocate for yourself. So, for me, where I live, getting to the hospital, getting parked, it was such a stress. And I was in pain, discomfort. I spent probably 5 years of my life with heat pads or hot water bottles constantly attached to me. I wasn't sleeping right. So showing up for these appointments, and, I kept during this time frame as well. So we're looking at from 25 to 30 years in age. I was going to the hospital a lot. I was taking myself to A&E because things were happening. I was losing my vision, like I said, my peripheral vision a lot, and having horrendous stomach pains, heavy bleeds, all sorts going on. Really frightening, really scary, and not getting any answers. No answers at all. And this went on and on. I had quite a few numbers of abdominal surgery. I think I had at least 4 or 5 to remove cysts from my ovary. I got huge cysts. That was a really common thing for me, to get cysts that grew really quickly, obviously causing me a lot of pain. I had a lot of surgery to remove those, and literally just got no answers about anything. And then I had a particular bad experience where I ended up in A&E, being admitting myself to hospital via A&E, and I'd had the coil put in, and that was a faff as well, because they couldn't do it manually, if that's the right word, so I had to have it done surgically. So whilst they were taking one of my cysts off my ovary, they put the coil in. Body didn't respond well to it. Ended up having to go back into hospital. I was in hospital for a very long time, I think it was a full week, if not longer, where I was just in excruciating pain, and no one could tell me what was happening. It was just chaos. I was just literally past myself with pain, and saw so many different consultants and just could not get a clear answer as to what was going on. And my mental health was that low at this point that, my quality of life was just non-existent. I couldn't do anything, I couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't socialise because I just wasn't well enough. And I felt like such a huge burden on my family and my now husband, and literally just hated myself so much. I was borderline suicidal, and I had suicidal thoughts. I was in a very dark place and I was scared. My body, to me at the time, my body hated me. Everything was going wrong. Everything was a struggle. I literally would go to work, drag myself through a day at work, come back and collapse either on the sofa or in bed. I had nothing going on outside of work because I just didn't have the energy, and I just wasn't getting any answers as to what was wrong with me. And it was a really scary place to be. And, alongside everything that was going on inside my body, outside my body, like my skin was really angry and upset. I had really bad acne. I had big open sores on my body. I was just a big mess. And throughout all of this, the biggest concern that any consultant medical profession had when they spoke to me was my fertility. They weren't interested in listening to how impacted my quality of life was, or my emotional well-being, or how it was affecting my mental health. Everything boiled down to impacting on my fertility. And after a really difficult, horrendous process, my husband and I came to the decision that I would have a hysterectomy because we could get no answers at all as to what was going on in my body. And I knew that I had a different pain in my uterus to what I had in my ovaries, and I could feel when I was ovulating. It was really painful. I could feel when my uterus was contracting, and there was just so much confusion around all the different consultants that I made the decision to have a hysterectomy. And I had a total hysterectomy, so I had fallopian tubes, ovaries, uterus and cervix removed. And it wasn't until I had that surgery and I came round from surgery that I was given a diagnosis of endometriosis and adenomyosis. So I had gone all that time without having a diagnosis. I'd been given, quote unquote, the diagnosis of IBS, which I just think is BS. It's like to me, it's an umbrella term for something they can't find the root cause of, but there'll be more on that later. So through all of this, I hadn't had any understanding as to what was happening in my body. I had my hysterectomy. They did it vaginally, and during the surgery, they ruptured my bowel. So I then had to go in for emergency surgery after that, and my recovery was long and difficult and painful. So all this happened, had my hysterectomy, eventually recovered, in inverted commas, and around the same time I went in to have my hysterectomy, I think it was about 2 weeks before I went in for the surgery, I was introduced to a company called Norwex. So that's Norwex, Norwex. And they were a Norwegian company that had come to the UK with their household cleaning products. And they educated on the impact of chemicals in the home and the links to health concerns that these chemicals had. So discovered Norwex, as I said, literally before I went into my hysterectomy, and I can remember listening to what they had to say about the number of chemicals that are found in our homes through things like cleaning products, personal care products, and the impacts that they can have on our health in a negative sense. And it kind of lit something up in my head, and I joined the company. At the time, it was a network marketing company, and I joined them and used their products, and during my recovery started to look at the impact of things like endocrine disturbing chemicals in health. And really, that was really like the trigger to me looking outside of what I would call the medical model. So starting on this journey of looking at like cleaner, safer ways to look after myself. So I'd come out of my surgery, hysterectomy, recovered, and was put on HRT. And then I went into this big mess of menopause, HRT. So I was just told, I literally left the hospital after my hysterectomy with carrier bags full of drugs, and was told that I needed to take HRT until I was 52. I had to wait something like 6 weeks and then wait till, take them till I was 52 and 52, 52. And I started taking these tablets, and for a while I kind of kidded myself that I was better, because the physical pain had gone, like significantly gone, and I could move my body, the bloating had gone, still having problems with my bowels because obviously they'd got damaged during the surgery, but in terms of like day-to-day exhausting pain, it had gone. I was able to sleep, I was able to move better, and I'd convinced myself everything was fine. So I carried on with HRT for a while, and it all kind of just peaked at once. I was having a lot of symptoms around taking HRT, and one of them was my memory, like brain fog. And it got to the point where sometimes I would just be looking at my husband and I couldn't remember his name. I couldn't bring his name to the front of my head, my brain, for it to come out of my mouth. And lots of things were going on like this, and I just got to the point where I was like, no, this is not going to be my journey. I don't want to feel like this for the rest of my life. And there's such a negative, shitty narrative around menopause in our culture that it's the end, that everything goes wrong, your vagina dries up, you forget your name, you're sweating yourself to death every night, and it's horrendous, and it's because we're getting old, and it's because of X, Y, and it's because of Z. And I kind of just had a word with myself. I can remember being in the bathroom, and I had patches and tablets, so I was putting these patches on my body, and they must have had latex or something in them that I'm allergic to, because every time I put the patch on, I think you kept them on for 3 days or something and then switched them over, but every time I took the patch off, it'd be really red and angry, my skin. So I'd keep moving the patches around different parts of my abdomen, and I can remember one morning getting out the shower, reaching for a new patch and just looking at my abdomen, and it was just red and angry and sore, and thinking, Amy, This is your body telling you she doesn't want this. And it was then that I kind of, like, my intuition really kicked in, and I just kind of said to myself, why am I believing this narrative that this menopause, my menopause in general, has to be so horrendous? Before we had HRT, we've had women, you know, for centuries surviving this passage of life, and like it just all came rolling to me at once, like this huge realization that my body, my mind, like all of my being had been through this huge trauma of losing my reproductive organs, and that I'd made this decision to have the hysterectomy through pure fear. It wasn't an informed decision. It came from a place of fear and desperation. And nothing ever good comes from, you know, when you're in that place. Yeah, and I just had this huge, like, moment of just like, this isn't going to be my story. I refuse to let this be me for the rest of my life. I've lost a good chunk of my life to the endometriosis, whatever it is that was going on in my body, like everything that was going on in the body before. I'm not going to let this be my narrative for the rest of my life. So I went to my doctor and talked to her about HRT, and she gave me a few different options. And to cut a long story short, I just decided that I wasn't going to take it anymore. That wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to look at alternative ways to support myself through menopause without the need of anything, you know, synthetic. So at around about the same time, I discovered a woman on, you know, Facebook ads who was talking about endometriosis. There was an advert that she was doing, and it was around endometriosis and the relationship between endometriosis and the liver. And I think the advert was something like 4 minutes long, and I must have watched that video I don't know how many times, because I can remember just listening to it and thinking, this makes absolute sense. Like, no one ever talked to me about my liver. No one ever talked to me about anything other than my ovaries and my uterus and my cervix. Even though there was stuff clearly going on in my brain, no one ever talked to me about the connection to other parts of my body. And I forgot to mention as well that I was also doing my own research into, you know, the kind of diets that I needed to change for the symptoms that I had. And at the time, I felt I was doing a lot, but as I've shared, I was in a really, really crap place, and I had not a lot of resource to share, so I wasn't doing as much as I know I should have been doing. I'm not going to say that, as I could have been doing, because I didn't have the resources available to me. I also was in a place of absolute pain, and I didn't want anyone touching me. Like, I can remember my mum, bless her, you know, she bought me some vouchers to go and see a reflexologist, and I was just at the point where I didn't want anyone else to touch me, because every time I went for a consultation, whether it was with a doctor or a consultant or, you know, whoever, I got touched and it freaking hurt, and it hurt for a long, long time afterwards. And anybody listening to this who has had any kind of, you know, endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovaries, like anything like that, you will know that pelvic examinations are painful. And for me, I would have one every time I went to the hospital, every time I went to see a doctor. Like, they always had to have a look inside, whether it was with an ultrasound or whatever. And literally, I would struggle to walk afterwards because I was in that much pain. So much like lack of resources when I was living it to actually be able to make an informed decision about anything. So moving forward, met this lady on the internet. She's called Dagmar Khan, and she was advertising her women's health certification program. And I stepped into her world in social media and just resonated so strongly with everything that she was saying that I made the crazy decision to just step into this certification program with her. And it was such a huge decision for me. It was a big financial decision. It was a big commitment. It was like an intensive year-long learning experience. And I just knew that I had to do this because she was just talking sense, and stepped into the program and just never really looked back, because I am forever like in debt to Dagmar, because she opened up my whole being to understand what the body needs to heal, what we as women need to heal. She fully understood how the female body worked, how the body worked, and she's literally blew me away. And as I was studying with her and still doing my own research and making changes within my own life, my health just improved so much, so much. And I am just eternally grateful for that. And in late 2019, I created Vagina Truth Bomb as a blog. And my intention was always to do a podcast, but I've only just been brave enough to do that. And as I stepped into Dagmar's program, my intention at that point was very much to focus on myself and my own healing. And I knew that once I'd completed the certification, if I decided to, submit all my requirements, I could become certified and a women's health specialist. But at the time, my intention was my own personal healing, and that's what I committed to. And healing, health, well-being, it's not a destination, it's a continual journey and evolution. And I have healed so much through learning what I know. You're not just learning it, but applying it, living it, believing it. And I just wish that I knew what I know now back in 2016 when I made the decision to have the hysterectomy, because I know that I could have avoided it. And I don't have any children. My husband doesn't have any children. And it was such a huge decision for us to make. And one of the things that really drives me now is the fact that my choice to have children is no longer there. I'm going to put my hand on my heart and say, if I could be fertile tomorrow, I'm not in a place where I would be jumping at the chance to have a child. That's not where I am at the moment, but I would love to have that choice. And it makes me so angry that, you know, I've shared this story with you today, and I know listening to this, you'll have your own story, and I know I'm not on my own. And I know there's other women out there that are struggling similar to how I have, and having to make decisions like I've had to make. And this is before I even start on all of the medical trauma you go through, you know, all the emotional and physical heartache of the way you are looked after, the way women's health views the body and treats the body, and, you know, the procedures that we have to go through. They're not pleasant, they're not nice, and a lot of the time, as I've shared, we're in a place where we're really vulnerable, and it just all adds up and just leads to just so many things. And yeah, like, it's huge, isn't it? So I'm just going to take a moment to take a breath here, because yeah, it's huge. So Vagina Truth Bomb was originally created as a blog, and I blogged for a bit, and then I stepped further into my healing journey, and I took a step back and continued to work on healing and caring for myself. And that's what I've been doing pretty much for the last 2 years. I've had the privilege to be able to do that for myself, and there's still stuff that I'm working through, and that's good. You know, I'm happy about that. But I am ready now to step fully into Vagina Truth Bomb as a women's health specialist, and to step forward and offer my services and my experience and my deep love for every woman on the planet going through any kind of health challenge to the world. And that's what I'm going to be doing with this podcast. I'm going to be opening up the doors to my business, so you can know how I work, get to know me, get to understand what I'm offering. And the main thing I want to do with this podcast is to open up conversations. Start conversations. I want you to listen to this podcast and connect with it, and then go and share it with your friends, whether that's you share the actual podcast episode or you start a conversation, create connection, so that together as women we can start to change these narratives and start to understand how our bodies work and what they need and what we need, and to know that it's okay for us to need what we need. Like, I haven't even touched on societal conditioning and how all that falls in on all this. This is literally just a whistle-stop tour of things that have gone wrong with my body. And just to give you that context as to where I'm coming from. So I hope that's been helpful for you, and I want to thank you for listening to me and spending this time with me today. And yeah, let's change the narrative together, and I look forward to connecting with you in the next episode. I wish you the most wonderful day. P.S. You are amazing. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vagina Truth Bomb, the podcast. It is a real honour to have you listening. I would love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and takeaways from this episode, and you can share them with me via the VTB community, which is accessible through my website, vaginatruthbomb.com. You can also share them via social media platforms, making sure that you tag me so that we can connect. All of my social media links are in my show notes. I would really love and appreciate it if you could help me in growing my audience by sharing this podcast with others who you think it will interest, or adding a screenshot to your stories and tagging me so I can send you some love back. Also, if you subscribe, follow, and review the podcast on the platform you're listening to, this will be a huge help too. Have a beautiful day, and I will catch you in the next episode. Much love, Amy.